what happens if there's an actual marketplace where the writers are
Right.
doing all the work for them? And that is really what Verblio's big innovation was. And that's why we're growing 600% in 5 years with no funding.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumitech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today we're speaking with Steve Pockross. Steve brings more than 20 years of startup, Fortune 500, and nonprofit experience to his role at Verblio. As CEO, he applies leading marketplace and SaaS principles to create an industry-leading content creation platform. Steve was part of the early management team at LiveOps, growing the company into the largest virtual contact center in the world and filling roles across marketing, strategy, operations, and partnerships. Steve received his MBA from Kellogg School of Business and his master's in history from Wesleyan University. Outside the office, Steve is a Denver native and enjoys ultimate frisbee and playing guitar. 2022, we're starting to understand how much we don't understand about content creation and about how fast things are moving and the different complexities of creating content and understanding where things are shifting and how consumer behavior is shifting. And with Verblio as a CEO, you're creating over 70,000 pieces of unique content each year. I'm going to have you explain how that is even possible. So you must have learned a few things about, how to do it right and how to distribute and understand how good these pieces of content are for the relevant audiences. So Steve, thank you very much for being here. And I'm excited to hear the story of Verblio.
Great. I'm excited to tell it.
Perfect. Well, let's get started first a little bit about yourself. You started with Wesleyan, studying history. Later on, you went to get your MBA in Northwestern Kellogg School of Management. But, going back to you studying history back in 1990 to today, running a company that is about content creation. Where do these two things lie in the spectrum of, your journey?
I don't know. It's one of my favorite questions to ask in an interview is anybody who takes your resume and you say, walk me through your resume, and they try to make it all have a theme and have it make sense. Those are the people I never believe. And so I think the focus of Wesleyan is that it's a liberal arts, is a deeply passionate liberal arts, curious university, all focused on learning as many things you can, learning how to think critically, learning how to write about it, analyze, discuss. All of those things I think are deeply interested in, and also finding out your passions for the future. How many different things could you possibly be passionate about? So I ended up with a history degree. It was focused on Latin American history. I spent 2 years living in South America, in Chile and Brazil. I worked for the Brazilian Development Bank. I worked as a financial reporter in Santiago, and all of these things just kind of built together. I could have been I was a few credits away from being an economics major. For me, I just pursued every passion. Everything that I found interesting is one of my kind of keys to how I got where I am, was follow the path of most learning. And the things that found you most interesting, they might not have made me the most wealth along the way. I might not have picked the best companies to fill the bank account, but I found the things that I found most interesting, and then your people find you if you do that. And so that's about as close of a connection as I can get between Wesleyan and leading a startup.
Well, you're mentioning the attempting to find a theme, and obviously I didn't even get started to talk about the different complexities of your journey, which are fascinating, from working, in solar energy and digital marketing, solar digital marketing, and then creating a company that is working with elderly and seniors in isolation, all the way to content creation. So obviously, this theme of following the path of most learning, I think that's really, really cool. 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, talking about Verblio, you're talking about content creation. Tell me a little bit about sort of your perspective on content creation.
Sure. So I will tell you, I didn't found Verblio. I took over as the CEO about 6 years ago from a journalist co-founder who had really started it with the idea of, this is interesting because most marketplace businesses start with an entrepreneur who looks at a market opportunity, says what need is not being met. How can I create the product or service to serve that need? And it rarely starts with, there is a surplus of great talent out there. What do I do with them? And so that's really at the heart of where Verblio is looking at the writers and freelancers and the journalists who don't have opportunities in the modern world and wanting to address those, and then looking at SEO and finding like, this is the place where great writing is going to happen. And so I took over when the company was, let's see, we're actually over 100,000 pieces of content per year. I think we were somewhere around 10,000 pieces of content a year to 20,000 at the time.
Wow.
And the key was this is a big challenge for any marketing channel that anyone's involved in, which is, where are you in the curve? And so very few channels have moved as quickly as content creation and SEO as far as how rapidly it develops. It evolves every single year. The number of competitors that are jumping in there because everyone can play in this channel. How do you ride that? The best market numbers that I have is that it was a $10 billion industry in 2 years ago, and it's going to be a $40 billion industry in 8 years. That is an insane ride. And so what it means is a few things. Like every marketing channel, it starts out with, well, I have to do this because other people are doing this. And then it becomes to, what could I do? Then how do I compete and continue to evolve so I stay ahead of the curve and still doing well? And the more people get involved, then it's, how do I find the best strategic partners? How do I find the best leaders so that I can invest bigger in this with better people so that I have a strategic advantage? And what now becomes core to my business, which is, you can't compete in modern business without strong content. Now you have to do, every year you're going to have to do more of it. It's going to have to be longer. It's going to have to be more in depth. It's going to have more interactive pieces, and it doesn't slow down. So the better you get, the more better you have to get later. And so we tried to create a company that was focused on how do we help our clients have a true competitive advantage by creating content, high quality content at scale, in deeper subject matter expertise than anybody else.
And so when you're talking about a few different things here that intuitively may seem conflicting. You're talking about scale, but you're also talking about deep expertise. How do those two things come together?
So that's the magic. This has been really hard to pull off. I had a formative experience in Silicon Valley. I started in 2004 with a company called LiveOps, which was one of the original marketplace SaaS companies. It grew to really rapidly. It was ranked, really high to go IPO. And it was basically a virtual call center company before terms like marketplace services, tech-enabled services, cloud, all of those things existed. And we created a 20,000 freelancer, home-based freelancer call center, all created on a cloud platform that could route calls to anywhere based on performance, which totally transformed the way that our clients could sell. And we were mostly looking at direct marketers who now, this is interesting, a little bit of a tangent. Before, you would have to hire a call center at 8 hours a day, every single worker. You would have to figure out exactly how many you have. So you try to get people to call you when you have call center agents available. If you can flip the model around and make it all incentive based, so the call center agent only gets paid for minutes they're on the phone, then you can create a call center that has 5,000 sales agents all available for 30 minutes and have it disappear after that. And that totally transforms your marketing capabilities by using a different business model. So we use that really effectively to completely disrupt different marketing channels. With Verblio, I looked at, how do you use that exact same incentive model? Use marketplace incentives, like dynamic incentives, like probably the core difference of our platform that aligns quality and scale is that our writers only get compensated. Our writers match themselves to the clients versus us doing a command and control outsourcing model. So that means that the writer gets to choose for things that they're qualified for, and they only get compensated if they've written a piece that the client accepts. So by doing that, at the core of the model, we built an entire technology platform around it. Our writers choose better. They have higher quality because they know they don't get compensated unless it's good. It's faster. So our average turnaround time is 48 hours versus a month. So that's a pretty amazing innovation. And we have an amazing amount of pent-up capacity. So we can actually scale 100% in a month, handle all of that with our pent-up capacity, and still control the level of quality. And we think about these marketplace dynamics every day because we think that the rest of the industry is really focused way too much on the thinking of outsourcing model of like how to turn into a marketplace is basically, it went from everybody was in a building and they were hired employees. And then everybody was remote and they were hired employees. And it saved you 8% on real estate costs. And all of a sudden they were freelancers. And that saves you another 10% and not having to pay taxes. But what happens if there's an actual marketplace where the writers are doing all the work for them? And that is really what Verblio's big innovation was. And that's why we're growing 600% in 5 years with no funding.
Incredible. Okay, so you're basically understanding that you're able to create this very unique marketplace and economy for the particular domain that you're in. You're talking about content creation. You're talking about there's an emerging need. You're understanding that the companies and really any business lives off of their content creation as a very, very important marketing vertical. And at the same time, you understand that you have this, it's not just the Great Resignation, but you have this new trend where you have this skill and you're able to leverage that skill through freelancers. And then if you're able to match these people, then it'll be fantastic. What have you learned about consumer behavior of the people that require the content? So the people that need the content for the companies, what do they actually care about? What makes for a good piece by a writer?
This is interesting. So the way that we learn this is less, so we're kind of meta in that we create our own content. So we're trying to resonate with our audience. But we also work with over 1,000 top digital marketers every month. And so we watch what their best practices are, what they're requesting as far as that we do. And so the most important things is consistency and relevance. So something that interacts with them. I think the industry of content creation did a great job of looking at the technical pieces of SEO, of what you need to write for, what are the keywords, what questions are people asking. So it's getting harder to actually write the unique way, or actually putting quality into the writing. So make it more compelling and making your audience want to read it. And so I think the best content marketers out there are not just writing about the topics that their audience is looking for, but they're also making it compelling in a way, either in a tone and voice or particularly relevant information that nobody else is, but really moving beyond the generic content that I think fueled the first wave of SEO. And we're moving beyond that. And the third piece is making it interactive. There's more video. We acquired an AI video company 3 years ago to help us turn every piece of written content into video, because each audience is going to want to watch and consume their content differently. It's just going to get harder. There's going to be more design. People are going to they're going to view quality in a number of ways, and you're trying to find what does your audience look for.
Got it. And so if we're looking today about, the tone of voice, the writer's ability to understand what this company is doing besides just the actual content that they need them to write, how do you match the tone, the voice, the call to action that a company may want to leave their users with once they read the content, if the content is written elsewhere? How do you mitigate that challenge?
So this is a huge challenge. It's one that we think about all the time. You're definitely how do you outsource your voice? How do you get somebody to write like you want them to?
Right.
So there are a few keys to it. One is from anything from a consulting gig where you hire like a marketing consultant to any other consulting gig, the first key is a good intake form. You need to understand exactly what your client's looking for, what their goal is and what their tone. So we've put a lot of thought into that. And when you go through our intake process, we try to get as much of what you're looking for into the platform as possible so writers can consume it friction free. So there's less friction in the process of content creation. And so that'll have things like a slider. What's your level of tone? Do you like it to be whimsical? Do you like it to be super heavy? Do you want it to be evergreen content? Do you want it to be a flash in the pan? And so the most important thing we ask for is an example of what you think good content looks like. And so that section, which the more that you put into that, the easier it is to actually agree on what quality and good looks like. Because there's some objective pieces like grammar and punctuation, but a lot of it is subjective. So that's kind of the upfront piece. The ongoing piece that's super critical is building a platform that has feedback and transparency. And so one of the key differences to the Verblio platform is every piece of feedback you give to any individual writer as a client will go to any writer that ever writes for you. And so what happens there is it's very transparent to the writers. They know if you're a good fit or not. They also, instead of training the really tiring process of training a writer one by one, you are training your team of writers that's incredibly flexible, that you don't have to pay for up front to be available, but that gets your tone. Your first piece of content with us will be your worst because you'll keep giving more and more feedback and transparency until the platform of writers gets you more and more. And so let's say you're doing 100 pieces of content per month. If it was in your, if you own, if you hired these people, you'd have 3 full-time writers. If you're working with Verblio, you'd have 10 to 15 freelance writers with a flexible cost structure where you could scale up and scale down with no additional cost, but that actually gets your tone. And most importantly, they don't get burned out because they haven't just written about diesel engines 100 articles a month for the last 3 months.
I love it. If we're looking ahead at where the world is going, are there going to be big shifts in your opinion about content creation or the way that the people then consume this written content? Or are we now on a good trajectory where we understand where things are at, we understand how things get written, the technology is up to speed with what we need, and we're good to go?
It's about to get really exciting. So the biggest trend that we're witnessing right now is creative digital marketers that are looking at how to use content as a deep competitive advantage versus a nice to have. So, for example, we have a new venture capital backed company that's creating 20,000 pieces of content in a short period of time. And this is their main marketing channel. So in the old world, you would hire a sales team, you would hire your paid marketing spend would go sky high, and you would try to build as much creation as you can. In the new world, we're seeing more and more businesses that are creating websites that are all about content to drive leads. We're seeing them do the similar type of things so that they blanket the internet as a new vertical, and all of a sudden content becomes the channel. And so I think that this hadn't been explored before because there wasn't really strategic capability to do so. So even if you wanted to, you couldn't do it. And now if you can do it, more and more marketers will think of more creative ways to do it. So I think it only gets harder. How do you create more content at more scale? The second big trend is how do you take existing, now everybody has this, I consider your content, all the content your companies read is basically your portfolio. It's your asset of assets that you have allocated, and you're going to fine tune those. So there's going to be a lot more focus on how do you take what was working before, your top 10% of pieces. How do you fine tune those, refresh those with 30% new content, make them relevant for Google again, get found. And that's going to be a whole new wave of content. And the third is really going to be about interactive design, video. And I don't even know what comes next. It could even be voiceovers and audio. But it's only going to get harder, and it's only going to get more interesting and more powerful.
So going back to the theme of, path of most learning and, the different non-traditional pathway of your career, where are you now? What do you learn a lot about in your current position, and why are you so excited about what you're doing?
God, I'm so lucky. I get to learn so much. So first of all, it's my first time being a CEO. I've been doing it for 5.5 years, but it is my first time doing it. And when you're a CEO and you ask other CEOs to mentor you, it's a very easy, everybody wants to mentor a new CEO. I don't know why. It's a really great opportunity. It's very much like on your podcast. You get to ask interesting people great questions. And so the first thing I asked was, what am I not knowing about this job that's different than other jobs? And Jim Franklin, who's a big tech CEO and mentor here in Colorado, told me that your job is going to change every 3 months and you're not even going to know it. But you have to pay attention to it and rewrite what your job description is. So we are currently, every 3 months, my job gets more interesting. We're about 50 people. We started with 10. All of those require different management concerns, different levels of sales. Whatever part of the company is the weakest leg of the stool is where I get to go learn about. I was not naturally a product person, but I have more product chops now, and it just kind of rotates. All of that is fascinating. I also have my own podcast where I get to do similar things to you, which is I invite on people that I want to talk to and learn from them every week. I learned during the pandemic that first of all, it's really hard to be a hyper extrovert during a pandemic. And so it gave me a reason to meet somebody new every single week. And the second was, it's really hard to do that ongoing learning by yourself. So even if you're a committed lifelong learner and you want to get there, unless you have a compelling event that forces you to get better all the time, sometimes you have to create your own compelling event. And so the podcast really did it for me. I interview way too many authors, which means I have to read their book ahead of time. But I wouldn't read the books otherwise. They would just stack up next to my desk. And now I have a chance to go through all of them and ask about a new subject every week. So I consider myself pretty lucky to keep doing what I'm doing.
Phenomenal. Steve, thank you so much for joining me. I love the energy. I love the insights and the intentionality behind everything. Best of luck with Verblio. Such a cool trajectory in an amazing market that is climbing and growing so fast. And something that at the end, we all experience it in our day to day. So it's just very, very cool. And I can't believe that you have over 100,000 content pieces per year. That's just unbelievable. Steve, thank you very much and stay safe.
Michael, thanks so much for having me. Great questions. Great show.